Okay, welcome everyone. I've got us right at the top of the hour. Welcome to the Resource Management Institute's first Power Up session, In the Cloud, Implications for Resource Management. My name is Thomas Meredith. I'm going to help out by moderating today's session. We're going to focus on the implications cloud solutions have for resource management. And during this session, we'll cover key trends, how these trends are changing the characteristics of project delivery, and the impact on resource management approaches. So we are allotted 30 minutes here. Go ahead and put your questions throughout the session. You can put your questions in our question panel there. We're going to also have some time at the end. You can certainly raise your hand. We can unmute you to contribute any ideas, any suggestions. We're going to bring our expertise to this subject, and we'd certainly like to hear from everyone on the line as well if you would like to contribute. We'll have time for that at the end. So with that said, I'm going to get out of the way and first hand off to the Managing Director of the Resource Management Institute, Randy Mislovic. Randy, welcome.
Great. Hey, Thomas. Good morning. Is my voice sound okay?
Sounds good.
Wonderful. Okay, perfect. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Randy Mislovic, Managing Director of the Resource Management Institute, and I'm just delighted to have all of you join us for the first of our quarterly Power Up sessions. These sessions are intended to provide, I'll just say, quick information on really hot topics in the area of resource management. And our first one this morning, in the cloud, implications for resource management. Hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. The whole movement in the industry to software as a service and applications as a service, et cetera, has really created a lot of needs for people relative to resource management, project management, and other things. So just as a quick reminder, the Resource Management Institute now has been in place a whole couple of months now, and we're delighted to, again, just as a refresher of our mission, that we are dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management through thought leadership, best practices, and standards development, along with globally recognized credentials that certify resource and workforce management expertise. So we're delighted to help build this community of people that have interest and need in the area of resource management, and that's really what the RMI is all about. And then, Mark, if you'll just take me one slide forward here, just as a reminder as well, we've got a great mobile-friendly website at resourcemanagementinstitute.com that provides you. Hey, Mark, you need to advance a couple of more there to build out slide. There we go. Okay, perfect. Opportunities to educate, communicate, and innovate. And by the way, joining the Resource Management Institute is free. So the upper right-hand corner there, circled in green, you can go see the. You can join the RMI for free and get access to all kinds of great information and to collaborate with your industry peers on topics related to resource management. So with that, again, welcome. I'm really glad to have you. We've got a big group today for our first session. I'd like to introduce Marc Lacroix. Marc is managing partner and co-founder of RTM Consulting. Marc has been with the company for 9 years. He is an expert in resource management, and delighted to have him as our speaker today to talk about, again, this really hot topic in the cloud, implications for resource management. So, Marc, with that, I'm going to turn the forum over to you.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Thanks, Thomas. Hi, everybody. So these sessions are meant to be, somewhat collaborative, lunch and learn style here. So that's why they're just 30 minutes, trying to get a little time in your day, hopefully give you something to think about. So I'm going to go through a few slides here, get the point across of the topic. I'm going to try to get a stop right around 20 minutes into the hour, and then look to see what comments, inputs you have. So I would say it's, think about not so much maybe just a question, but maybe something you want to share or contribute to the conversation. Because again, you guys are all doing this in your day-to-day life, and love to hear different opinions or viewpoints you've got. Again, the idea that we're trying to drive here is knowledge collaboration. So it's not just about me sharing my opinion, but it's really about you all kind of sharing what's going on in your world for the benefit of everybody else on the line as well. So we'll reserve about 10 minutes for that. which you can leverage the tool to raise your hand. I can unmute you, and you can actually share your live feedback. Let me set this up a little bit and say that when we look at the cloud and SaaS, right, it is definitely causing a change to our business model of the companies that we work for, but also the professional service organizations that we are part of or support. And one of the biggest things, of course, is what TSIA is going to put out, which says that in order to kind of evolve as companies from a license-based model to a cloud or SaaS-based model, it's going to be a revenue hit, right? We go from getting a lot of money up front to a lot of money spread out over time. And so what that does, of course, is going to put quite a bit of strain on the profit and loss statement. Revenues will sag in the short term while we kind of get to that recurring revenue stream, and costs to really realign the business around this new model are going to be a little higher until we can kind of normalize. So, the setup here is like kind of what does that mean to PS? So just taking TSI's point of view a little further here is really PS kind of has you might say a dual mission, not necessarily a mixed mission, but sometimes it could feel that way, of course, that on the one hand, we have to keep doing what we do in the core of our business, really well. We have to continue to, try to do a little more with less and optimizing as even the nature of our projects are starting to change. And so that's a challenge in and of itself, continue to optimize and drive greater profitability. But at the same time, we're also being looked to be key enablers of this transformation. So whether that is starting to plug in, the gaps and holes of what this migration to more of a cloud-based delivery model for the company means, what it means is there are other areas around customer success and customer nurturing that has to happen over longer periods of time. Potentially the introduction of value-added services to really help to differentiate from just the slam and go type projects to the more kind of extended life cycle of our clients. So again, what PS is being asked to do is also starting to expand. And there's a few things that they teased out of what this means. I'm going to cherry pick a couple of this. One of those being is that really actually billable utilization is trending down a little bit right now in deference to a little bit of non-billable utilization. And the way I interpret that is there's getting to be more roles and things that PS is needed to do in this transition. When you look at kind of SaaS-based, maybe we're doing a little more support, maybe we're doing a little bit more customer stat type work, and so that's sapping our billable utilization a little bit. You're seeing more work going in terms of the increasing subscription revenue, but the more going to COE delivery, more kind of getting distributed around are also some trends, right? Now that we've become a little more virtualized as teams, we start to see the classic project model start to, I say break down, I should really kind of say evolve or change a little bit in that mix. So the only part I can't quite reconcile is that second bullet on the green box. It says average deal size. And I think what that means really is that the overall deal that we sell may be bigger in total, a 3-year subscription with everything in it. But again, imagine a much flatter deal both from a product revenue as well as to some degree, this has kind of a little bit of an effect too on the PS dynamics as well. So what is the impact? Well, in my view, and I've kind of noticed this in just seeing the project characteristics of moving from, say, a kind of a licensed implementation project, a premise-based versus the SaaS-based. And some of you may have noticed this as well. But what I call it is the incredibly or magically shrinking project. I feel like it's one of those where there's no absolute zero, but I think some companies are trying to test that notion. I see, what used to be $100,000 projects go to 75, go to 50. I see people trying to take some of those same type of implementations and somehow fashion them into $15,000 projects with still the same headline of, hey, we can get you up and running on our software. Well, at some point, that's simply, it's going to get to the point of ludicrous, and I feel like to some degree that's happening. But the reality is that this is happening nonetheless. So projects are getting smaller. We have to reckon with that. They're also getting flatter, but not necessarily shorter. Right? So if it's going to take 500 hours worth of work to get the customer up and running and implemented, in a SaaS world, sometimes I'm noticing that the sense of urgency, the sense of timelines, gets a little loosened. And so what that means then is all of a sudden the project gets a little longer and more extended. Doesn't mean that that's less effort. It doesn't necessarily mean that, again, we can do it faster, which we probably could. But again, they tend to go longer, if anything. We're trying to get our projects more template-based than ever, less reliant on hero work or cowboys in the field that just camp out with the client and work their tail off to get everything working. Because we're hosting the solution, because we're going to multi-tenant in many cases, the projects do become more standardized, and so we try to capitalize on that and make them a little more templated. And what that means, though, of course, is that's generally considered a good thing, a little more predictability. But the question is, does it all neatly fit into these structures and these templates? And what that we care about from a resource management is, can we make good assumptions on resources and resource needs based on these templates? How mature are we with understanding the nature of those templates? More multi-phase versus big bang. Now, your company may be the type of solution that you've always done multi-phase, maybe because you have a complex solution, but certainly even in SaaS, where you might say they're more straightforward solutions, there is a line of thinking out there by leadership that says, again, let's just get them up and running. Let's get them live. So what that means is they'll try to strip down phase one into just the bare necessities. And they'll try to get the client to kind of buy into this vision of, hey, just get the lights on, let's get going. And let's lose phase 2 and 3 to kind of mature your use of the project, the product. So again, maybe a little less emphasis on that big go live and more on a multi-phase incremental approach, which again, you can think of the implications for resource management. More post-implementation work that's harder to plan for. So because of these multi-phase, because there's a lot of deferment of features of functionality and capability, there tends to be a lot more left over on the back end to work on. And that falls into this very much more difficult realm of work to figure out how to staff plan for. It might be chunks of work or almost issues and incidences that arise versus actually predictable work. It might be bucket of hours that they'll call off. So how do you resource plan if that part of the capacity demand starts to grow quite a bit? And so, last is it leads to the degradation to some degree of project staff plans. When you've got a flatter, more phased approach, things like that, it's hard to. I'm seeing as much as the projects are shrinking, I'm also seeing people getting sliced up in very creative ways, and in some cases, sliced up way too thin. So, in some cases, our staff plans that we're coming up with are unrealistic, or at best inadequate. I alluded to a little bit how I think this affects RM. I'd be curious as to hear your opinion when I'm done talking. But smaller assignments to me equates to more churn. More churn meaning we've got a lot more assignments to process, a lot more turnover from project to project of people, and again, in some cases, juggling multiple assignments. More part-time roles. The spreading of the projects, when you take a 500-hour project and you spread it over 10, 12 weeks, and you have significant gaps in time when the customer is going through their milestones, it means you have to kind of shave or slice people, right? Because there might be 2 weeks in the middle of the project where there's very low burn for whatever reason, and so you have to make kind of parts of resources disappear, or at least from the sake of that's how it was modeled. Maintaining continuity of resources across multiple phases. So kind of highlighted that these engagements tend to have many parts to them. They tend to kind of spread them out. Let's hurry up and get them live, but then, let's get to the busy work in phase 2 and 3. Well, when we know when we hit gaps between phased work, we hit big areas of slack. How do we try to keep the same knowledgeable resources of that situation on the burner and ready to go? And it kind of gets back to the theoretical of how many ways can you actually slice a resource to be effective. I'm sure many of you have that debate of, you take the common role of project manager. How many projects can a project manager handle? And I don't care how big or little they are. It's really how many different clients can a project manager adequately serve and do a good job of managing the risks, issues, and making the client happy at the same time. I have my opinion, but I'm going to reserve that one for this conversation. But it goes to any resource, solution architect, implementation consultant, or otherwise, is if we have to go to more, part-time assignment, what's the method for being able to determine what an adequate slice of a person can be per role? So given that as a context, what can RM do about it? And again, this is where I'd love to hear in a couple of minutes anything you guys may be doing that you want to share with the rest of the group. One thing, of course, is come to grips with this part-time allocation stuff. By role, by nature, by type of project, that kind of thing. How much can a resource legitimately be sliced? And it should and probably does vary by role. I'll tell you right now, if your number's more than 4 or 5, I would question. I'd probably have to question your thought process a little bit, because again, you got to think of attention span and focus and things like that. If we're talking about, I'll call it more traditional implementation delivery work, it will vary by role. PM, of course, the most common, but again, you got to look at those other roles as well. And you need to drive that thinking on resource allocations by role. So as much as we spend a lot of time in determining how do we estimate projects, come up with that kind of raw level of effort to implement a set of requirements for a customer, I think we have to put that same amount of effort into really breaking down what each role does in a project, and certainly in these new types of projects that are evolving, and saying, what's realistic? And I tell you what tends to happen when people don't do that and just slice the resource, you leave a lot on the floor, so to speak, of you see the kind of visually, every time you slice a person, you lose a little bit of capacity, because they just can't break themselves up that much. You've got to shift gears, and it's very difficult on the resource to do. In managing higher churn, right? So we got to look at our RM to staff ratios potentially. I've seen customers I work with have a range, right? They serve one client base with a lot of high churn versus one that's more mature with less churn. The ratio can change, and so the question is acknowledging that higher churn leads to a lower RM to staff ratio, and so it's worth revisiting that. It's a cost of doing business, you might say, and that's the where not just from an RM but from a greater standpoint, kind of figure out how to better optimize. So it is a more costly model of sport simply because you've got from our point of view more transactions to deal with, more assignments to process to try to keep that same level of utilization, to keep that same level of productivity of the staff. And the other thing that kind of sensing a little bit, and not sure how this plays out in reality, is more staff autonomy. So how does the consultant themselves, we talk about part-time assignments, talking about high churn, talking about getting a consultant allocated to 3 different projects. A lot of times people say, well, you're allocated for 25% this week, but really we're not down at the fine-grained level of what exactly is going on this week, and is that realistic, and how does that compete with the other 3 projects they're working on? Well, this is where potentially the actual staff can potentially help load balance themselves to some degree. Now, this is again early days thinking. I know a couple companies that are starting to give this some thought. How can they, once we allocate a certain amount of work that we think they can handle, how do they become part of this? I'll call it scheduling and load balancing of those assignments. And then last is kind of revisiting how we allocate work. So kind of implied in all that I was mentioning was, traditionally we might have taken, kind of depending on what perspective you're coming from. Some people, do the peanut butter spread flat allocation, 12 hours all the way across. Well, that can work sometimes, obviously, because you just create more stacks. So I'll call it the pancake stack. But the reality of the problem that I just mentioned, where that disguises the fact that the person might have, you know, 2 go lives in the same week or same month, and that really isn't an adequate allocation. It might, you know, look more like below, which is the accurate allocation of where they're going to expend their time for that project, because it's based on milestones. We have design, we've got UAT, and we have go live, and that might look something like that. So, you know, what's the right way to, you know, allocate these projects? It takes more work to do the part on the bottom, but it may be more accurate. The top, it takes a little less work to manage the assignment, but it's potentially going to be a little more difficult on the teams, because again, you might have 2 or 3 go lives all in the same month. So again, revisiting the allocation and how you do it is probably worth doing as well. All right, so as I said, I've hit just about the 20-minute mark, and at this point, I welcome anybody else that wants to kind of weigh in. Again, this is meant to be a little bit of a knowledge share forum, and so if anybody's interested in kind of sharing any input or their point of view, or maybe there's some practice that you're doing along these lines that you think others, you know, you want to brag about a little bit, I'd say go for it. So if anybody at this point wants to raise their hand, I'm happy to unmute you and give you the floor. I know it's intimidating. It's not too huge of a crowd, but you guys, yeah. And alternatively, too, if you are a little shy, we do have the question box that we can use. We use this for any of our kind of webinars that we do. You could just kind of key in the question box any comment you want to make or any question you might have to the group, and then I'm happy to kind of reconvey it that way. So.
Okay. So Mark,
yeah,
Mark, we have. Do you see the question in the panel, Mark?
Yes, I do. Yeah, so a question came through: what skills, tools can we point resources towards as they start to manage their time more accurately? Some resources load balance better than others. So it is a good question. I'm not sure if I have the answer. You know, kind of the point is, you know, what skills, tools can we point resources to start manage their time more accurately? You know, time management is something that every, I think, delivery resource is challenged with, from senior leaders all the way down to consultants. You know, the idea that, you know, kind of understanding and planning ahead on their time. Now, if we did a situation where we were, you know, allocating somebody across 2 or 3 projects, then we are putting a little more burden on them to try to balance and anticipate. You know, the key when you mention tools, since the person weighed in, is, you know, where I see people starting to think is, how can we leverage our PSA system or our infrastructure? You know, right now we have personal calendars that aren't necessarily connected to our RM calendars or our assignments, and you know, I don't know the answer yet in terms of how to kind of start to marry those two up. You know, in the meantime, you know, to some degree, you know, they have to be empowered to be able to communicate to the resource manager and their project manager as to, you know, what's going on week to week, as opposed to being kind of order takers. But if anybody else has, you know, something else to weigh in on that, I'd welcome that. Another comment or coming in says, you know, we're seeing a large increase in smaller, shorter projects. Thank you for validating my premise up front. That take the same effort to staff. I would agree with that. So we're struggling with workload as the churn increases, and I can't see an easy solution other than increasing our RMO headcount. So that's a kind of a good point, and a little bit of a reinforcement to what I said. I know it's not easy to have to say we need more RMs for the same level of staff that we've been supporting, but that's kind of what the data would indicate, that higher churn leads to more work. What I like to view resource management, we tend to view it as a people ratio, right? 1 to 75, or, you know, kind of wherever you fall, 1 to 50, 1 to 100. But the reality is the number of assignments that you're processing, the number, if one person carries 12 assignments over the course of the year, that's a lot more than if one person just stays on one project all year, right? That's 12 times the amount of work that a resource manager handles. So the goal ultimately would be to try to represent that workload versus just the kind of the people part of it, but also just the amount of churn and trying to characterize that. So I think you're right. First thing that kind of weighed in is it is simply more work. It's a more workload, which would indicate that you might need to add more RM help.
Yeah, hey, this is Randy. Mark, I want to add one thing to that last comment as well. Don't forget too that your PSA or PPM tool that you're using to help automate some of these processes is really important, and I would encourage people. We've seen a lot of evolution of resource management capabilities in the various commercial tools that are available. Some are much better than others in giving the RM a lot more useful information to help with the supply and demand matching. So I would always be questioning, looking at it, asking the question, is my PPM tool doing everything it can do to help us be as productive as we can? So as your volumes go up, hopefully you can start getting your tool to do more of the, I'll say, analytical work that then a resource manager can do something about. So Mark, I'll let you go ahead and address the next question there in the panel.
Yeah, one of the participants is kind of challenging the audience to say, what methods do other RMs use to have staff autonomously fill in white space? So she mentions that they have used a publishing or push notification type tool and let resources grab assignments. So something maybe less than 5 hours, and it must be billable or pre-sales. So you might say it's a job jar, like automated, job jar type thing. I guess again, the question to everybody is: has anybody kind of got, made progress along this lines of trying to get the consultant involved in kind of filling up some of that white space?
It's almost kind of like an Uber model, right? I'll push it out there and let people sign up for the ones they want to take. That's an interesting approach.
Not seeing anybody add to that line of thinking, which tells me my sense is that it's an interesting opportunity area that I think is going to become more important as, again, if some of the premises that I put out there, which I think you guys are reinforcing of, smaller ladder projects, a lot more white space, a lot of churn, we're going to have to find ways to close down some of that. I've got one response says that they use Socialcast for pre-sales work. Sales post their wish list and consultants will put their hands up, but it's not for billable work yet. So at least for pre-sales, they use Socialcast. That is okay.
Yeah, I'll just mention too, in some of the other services spaces, like in field services or the support side, those organizations have begun moving to these Uber-like models where they're allowing outside contractors even to bid on work or short snippets of opportunity. And they're learning how to use this Uber-like model to fuel their needs. So Mark, I'll let you pick up with the next one there.
Yeah, so this will be the last comment I make, and then I'll just want to wrap it up to keep on time. But another person weighed into that question that their consultants are motivated to look for projects and to fill up white space as they have a goal, and bonus attributed to utilization. I think that's still a very valid point. It's currently manual, but they reach out to the RMOs looking for engagement. So that's still a valid point where if you put a clear-cut utilization goal on all the staff, that acts as a bit of a motivator as well, and it still may be manual, but they're kind of part of helping solve that. So, all right, very good. Well, just given our time, just want to kind of wrap by just putting it out there, a reminder that we, one of the things that RMI sponsors and drives is the RMCP certification program. Just kind of want to highlight some upcoming dates around that. A planned live session in Cincinnati in October, and our next online will start in November. You can see if you early bird dates there and where you can apply for that. So thanks everybody for being part of the first one ever of these. I hope to keep these as a recurring, and looking for honestly any member of the RMI who wants to step up to the mic here and participate in these. This is really what it's about, a forum for all of us, and so we'll get some more scheduled for you in the near future. With that, thanks. Randy, any final comment?
Just last one, if you have any questions about anything today or the certification program itself, you can always send an email to rmcp@resourcemanagementinstitute.com. And of course, go to the website. There's lots of good information out there. And again, it's free to join, and there's a ton of great information out there. We're delighted to be building this community of resource managers. Thanks everyone for your participation today. And with that, we'll conclude the broadcast.
All right. Thank you.